All right, get ready because today we're going deep on a story. A story that's sweeter than a stack of pancakes, but oh, there's a twist. A crime so wild it'll leave you wanting more. Get this? It's the Great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist.
Yeah. Usually when you think about like high stakes heists, maple syrup, it's not the first thing that pops into your head. But this case, oh, it's got twists and turns like any diamond heist.
And to really get the audacity of this whole thing, you got to understand like the power. The Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers, they call them the PPAQ now, they've got a grip on this liquid gold. We're
Mhm.
talking 77%, a whopping 77% of the global maple syrup supply.
Yeah, that's right. It's a system they've got, these reserves, these huge warehouses way out in rural Quebec, just packed, overflowing with barrels of maple syrup. They're trying to keep those prices steady, make sure there's always syrup flowing, but well, I guess they kind of made themselves a target.
So picture this. Warehouses as far as the eye can see, thousands and thousands of barrels, and they only check them once a year for inventory. I mean, that's a lot of trust, right?
Yeah, you could say that. And that little detail, well, it gave this group of, let's just say, clever thieves, the perfect chance to pull off a heist. And not just any heist, one of the most audacious heists in Canadian history.
Okay. Let's break this heist down. How do you even start with something this big? I mean, this isn't like grabbing a couple of bottles from the store.
Well, this was a long game, you see. Months and months of planning. It all started with trucks. They'd use these trucks to move barrels from that PPAQ facility straight to a remote sugar shack. Kind of ironic, huh? The heart of maple syrup production turned into a hideout.
It's almost poetic, right? In a kind of messed up way. But what were they doing with all those barrels at the sugar shack? They couldn't just like vanish them, could they?
Oh, no. It was much more, let's say, refined in the beginning. They'd siphon out the syrup, real careful like, and replace it with water. Keep the weight the same, see? And then they'd slip those tamper barrels right back into the warehouse, hoping no one noticed till that yearly checkup.
Clever, but man, that's risky. Sounds like the kind of plan that could fall apart pretty easily. Did it work? Did they keep it up?
Surprisingly, yeah, for a while they were under the radar. But then, you know how it goes, greed takes over.
Uh-huh.
They got bolder, started taking whole barrels, just leaving them empty. They figured, hey, no one's checking till next year, right?
That's one heck of a gamble. Makes you wonder what was going through their minds, you know? Just blinded by dollar signs, or was there more to it?
That's a good question. Maybe a little peek into the minds of these guys, eh? We'll get into that later, but first, let's talk about the moment it all came crashing down.
Okay, paint us a picture. July 2012, time for the big inventory check. What happens?
Imagine this. Michel Gavreau, an inspector, going about his business. He's expecting, the weight of a full syrup barrel, goes to climb a stack like he's done a million times before, and then whoosh, almost takes a tumble.
Wait, what? Hold on. Why? What happened? Did the stack collapse?
Not quite. Those barrels, the ones he reached for, empty. Completely empty. He was expecting hundreds of pounds of syrup, and there was nothing, just air.
Whoa, what a way to find out about a heist. I can only imagine. The shock. So, this is it, right? This is where the sweet dream turns sour.
Yep, the jig was up. Empty barrels, well, they were like a giant alarm bell, and the authorities, they heard it loud and clear.
So the game's over, the syrup's gone missing, and now the authorities are stepping in. What happened next?
Well, you got to remember, this wasn't just some petty theft. We're talking about millions of dollars worth of syrup vanished into thin air. The Sûreté de Quebec, that's Quebec's provincial police force, they launched a full-on investigation. It didn't take them long to start untangling this web of, well, sticky fingers.
I bet that investigation was a wild ride. Did they have any leads to go on, or were they starting from scratch?
Well, they had the empty barrels. That was a pretty big clue. Right. But the real key, they had Michel Gavreau, the inspector who stumbled upon the whole thing. He became a key witness, helping the investigators piece together the timeline, the potential suspects.
Sounds like they needed someone with a sharp eye and, like, a real understanding of the maple syrup world. Did they find the culprits?
Oh, they did. The investigation led them straight to the alleged mastermind, the guy pulling the strings, Richard Valliere. The crazy part is, he was a known figure in the maple syrup industry. Nobody expected that.
It's always the ones you least suspect, right? But a heist this big, I mean, he couldn't have done it alone, right?
You got that right. This was a whole operation, like a well-oiled machine. Richard's own father, Raymond Valliere, he was in on it too, along with a bunch of others, each with their own part to play.
Just run down, who were these accomplices, these syrup bandits?
Well, there was this guy, Etienne Saint-Pierre, syrup reseller over in New Brunswick. He was helping move the stolen goods across the border. See? This thing, it went beyond Quebec.
So they were going big, huh? Spreading those sticky fingers across Canada. Anyone else?
Oh, yeah. Then there's Avik Caron, the inside man. Classic, right? His connection to the warehouse, that was crucial. He knew the place inside and out, made it easy to move those barrels around without anyone noticing.
The classic inside job. It's like something straight out of Hollywood. And of course, they needed someone to actually drive all that stolen syrup, right?
Right? That's where Sebastian Jutras comes in, the trucker. He was a key part of the logistics, unknowingly hauling millions of dollars worth of stolen syrup.
Wow. So we got the mastermind, the family connection, the out-of-province distributor, the inside man, and the transporter. Quite a cast of characters for a story about, well, missing syrup.
It's something else, isn't it? But this heist, it goes beyond just the people involved. It showed how vulnerable the whole maple syrup industry is, and that had some serious consequences.
I'm curious about that. What kind of impact did this heist have on the maple syrup world? Did it shake things up?
Oh, absolutely. Remember, the PBAQ controls a huge chunk of the global market. So any disruption, it's like a ripple effect. Prices went up and down, people were worried about shortages, and yeah, consumer trust took a hit.
You know, it's easy to laugh about a maple syrup heist, but it really shows how even something as ordinary as syrup can be a target.
Exactly. It makes you think, what motivates someone to do something like this? Is it all about the money? Or is there something more going on?
That's what's so fascinating. It's not just about the theft itself, but like the minds of the people behind it. What drives them? What are they thinking?
Some might say it's a bunch of things, right? The lure of easy money, the thrill of outsmarting a big organization, maybe even feeling like they could get away with it. It's complicated.
It's like they saw a weakness, a loophole, and they just went for it.
Yeah.
Shows you that human ingenuity, even when it's used for bad stuff, can be pretty impressive.
And it highlights how important it is to always be on guard. The PPAQ, just like any organization dealing with valuable stuff, they got to constantly adapt, improve their security, stay one step ahead of those looking to take advantage.
This whole thing is just mind-boggling. We went from a quiet sugar shack to a heist with international implications. It's amazing how one event can expose so much, like global trade, security, and just how far people will go for profit.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's the whole world of maple syrup production, the PPAQ's history, the economic fallout, the fight against syrup theft, all that's out there waiting to be explored.
It's true. There's always more to discover. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, except this onion is filled with, well, delicious syrup.
And sometimes that syrup comes with a side of crime.
Before we get lost in the sweetness of it all, let's talk about the legal side. What happened to these syrup bandits? Did they face the music? It's one thing to pull off a heist like this, but come on, did they really think they could get away with it? What happened when the law caught up with them?
Well, the legal side of things. It was almost as interesting as the heist itself. Remember Richard Valliere, the mastermind? He got 8 years in prison and a fine, get this, $9.4 million.
Oof, that's a lot of pancakes. The courts weren't messing around, huh?
And there's a twist, see? The Quebec Court of Appeal, they actually lowered the fine down to $1 million. But then the Supreme Court of Canada stepped in and said, nope, back to the original amount.
Wow, talk about a legal roller coaster. It's like they were trying to figure out, like, what's the right punishment for stealing all that syrup? What about the rest of the crew? Did they get off easy?
Oh, no, they didn't. Richard's father, Raymond, he got some prison time, too. Not as long, though. And the others, the reseller, the inside man, the trucker, they all got a mix of prison and fines, depending on how much they were involved, you know.
It really shows you, even though it's maple syrup, this was serious. The authorities were making a point. You can't just steal a national treasure and walk away.
You got it. This whole case, it was a wake-up call. They needed better security, and everyone had to realize, hey, supply chains can be vulnerable. It's not just about syrup, it's a bigger lesson.
You mentioned earlier the psychology, like what makes someone pull off a heist like this, especially with something as, I don't know, normal as maple syrup.
Yeah, it's a big question. What makes people break the law? It's been debated forever. In this case, I mean, money was a big part, right? Millions of dollars, that's a lot of motivation.
It's like striking liquid gold, except instead of a river, it's a warehouse.
But I don't think it was just about greed. You know, maybe it was the challenge, the thrill, or even some kind of, I don't know, resentment towards the PPAQ. All that power they have, it's not so simple.
It's like they saw a way in, a weak spot, and they went for it. Human ingenuity, it can be amazing, but also kind of scary when it's used for the wrong reasons.
Exactly. The PPAQ, they got to be on their toes, always changing things up, keeping their security tight. Otherwise, someone else might see an opening.
So we've reached the end of our deep dive. This wild story, the Great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist. What should our listeners take away from all of this?
Well, first off, crime can happen anywhere with anything. Don't think your everyday stuff is safe. Who knows what they'll target next?
Maybe I need to start guarding my coffee beans.
It also shows how connected everything is. Something happens in Quebec, and the whole world feels it. Prices, supplies, trust, it all gets shaken up.
And it's a peek inside the criminal mind. What makes someone do this? It's not always clear cut. Greed, opportunity, maybe a bit of rebellion. It's all mixed up.
It's definitely given us something to think about. And remember, this is just the beginning. There's so much more to explore about maple syrup, the PPAQ, the impact, everything.
To our listeners, keep digging, stay curious, and enjoy that maple syrup. Just make sure it's the legal kind.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those pantry shelves secure.